Let's continue our conversation with former INS officer Michael Cutler. Michael, you have pointed out in the past that you are a registered Democrat. When you see the President of the United States, who remains the head, in essence, of the Democratic Party, continue to push for what he calls a, quote, more sensible immigration system, what is your reaction?
It makes me ill, I gotta tell you. I think the wheels have come off the Democrat Party's wagon, but I don't think the Republicans are far behind. Our immigration laws were enacted to do two simple things: protect American lives and national security, and protect the jobs of American workers. Prior to the Second World War, immigration was the responsibility of the U.S. Labor Department. And today you would never know it. Rather than finding opportunities to get Americans working, you know, the Democrat Party that I joined when I was back in college was the party of blue-collar America. My dad will always be my biggest hero. He was a tradesman, a plumber, a construction worker. And the Democrat Party stood with the average American worker. And the Republicans stood with people who own businesses. Obviously, they have conflicting interests. The arrangement made sense. America made sense. Today, both parties are betraying their traditional base because they're being paid these incredible campaign finance contributions, if you will, and it's twisted reality and decency. You know, we're hearing so much today about the need for wage equality, and everyone is cheering about it, and the comedians on TV joke about it. But what most folks don't know, because they don't ask, is who do you want to make more equal? And if you look at Alan Greenspan's testimony when he testified for Chuck Schumer back in 2009 before a Senate Immigration Committee hearing on comprehensive reform, it was about removing what he called the wage premium of high-skilled, highly educated American workers to narrow the gap between the middle class and the poor.
And so, Michael, to the here and now, I spoke earlier of creating a permanent underclass.
Yep.
And the political equation, sadly national security notwithstanding, as you take a look at it, try to figure out what establishment Washington is up to. Is it a pact between the left looking for cheap votes and those who claim to be on the right looking for cheap labor? Is that about to win out in terms of the establishment point of view as typified now in Washington, D.C.?
I'm fearful that it is. And, you know, it's so remarkable because we keep hearing about how wages are in decline. They give us a nonsense 5.8 unemployment rate while they blithely ignore 100 million unemployed adult Americans. And we keep hearing this is about the Latino vote. They've interjected racism into a discussion that has nothing to do with racism, which I think also fans the flames when you see the protests around the country. This is not about racism, and in fact, it's America's minorities that are suffering the worst violence and the worst unemployment and poverty. It's time our own government stood for Americans, but that's the job American citizens hopefully will make their resolution for the coming year to become involved in the political process. You know, you can't be a good parent if you're not involved in politics, because this is about the future of our children and their children. And I always like to make the point that democracy is not a spectator sport.
And mindful of that, you've got Hillary for the Democrats, Jeb Bush now being touted as the early front runner for the Republicans, both of them open borders enthusiasts. Will the public, regardless of party, will the public offer a course correction coming up for 2016? Do you expect a pro-enforcement candidate on either side of the aisle to emerge? A minute remains. I'll give you the last word.
I certainly hope so. You know, I've often said it. I had the privilege of being with Senator Jeff Sessions. The guy is a conservative Republican. He stands on the right side of these issues. I wish he would run for president. But I hope that the American people understand just how bad things have gotten, how our government is now lying to us routinely. We're getting propaganda, not the truth from our own government. And we are the employers of the Congress and the president and all these elected politicians. It's time that we became better employers and made our employees far more accountable, don't you think, J.D.?
And Michael Cutler, on that note, I would simply point out that I think you're getting a lot of widespread agreement across the country. Those listening to our discussion will see if it yields results or at least consequences politically as we continue to update folks on the 2016 presidential sweepstakes. Michael Cutler, to you, sir. You have our thanks. We look forward to our next visit. And when we come back on America's Forum, the Hollywood hacking, just who was behind it? Stay tuned.